The border is closed. The border is secure. What we need other countries to do, because it is a regional challenge and it requires a regional solution, we need other countries to enforce their laws of humanitarian relief, as well as to enforce their enforcement protocols at their respective borders.
The Justice Department sued Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the floating barriers meant to prevent illegal border crossings.
And the state of Texas is now suing the Biden administration yet again, this time, though, to stop agents from cutting the state's razor wire that was installed along the Rio Grande. As we have previously reported, that wire is all part of Governor Greg Abbott's efforts to stop people from crossing into the state.
The crisis has fueled fears of another Haitian migrant exodus in the U.S. and here in the Dominican Republic. The DER has built a 12-foot tall border wall to protect them from gangs and crime. They call it a smart security fence with drones and cameras, night vision and watchtowers. Yesterday, we drove in dune buggies along the border with Haiti, with a commander of CESFRONT, the Dominican Republic's Border Patrol. Construction of this new border wall began last year. The president of the Dominican Republic says so far about 100 miles of border wall has been completed. The goal is to eventually have a border wall run along the entire border with Haiti. He says it'll change the Dominican Republic forever. The physical wall is already doing its job. From a security standpoint, it is helping us a lot. Meantime, the DR is also doing their deportations. In fact, every day, truckloads of illegal Haitians are dropped off at the border. They've received international criticism for this, but the government here says it is necessary for law and order.
Mexico's government said Tuesday it would not accept the return of migrants. The Texas orders to leave the United States after the Supreme Court allowed the state to enforce a strict new immigration law signed by Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Look, obviously, you have Mexico doing the White House's bidding in terms of wanting chaos on the border, which is sort of par for the course. To that sense, though, in a way, has the administration now end run the Texas law? They say there's going to be chaos. This seems to indicate exactly that.
No. In fact, this isn't going to affect it in any way, shape, or form. Because these individuals that cross our borders illegally, they're not going to want a criminal conviction on their record. And if they trespass, they're still going to be prosecuted for that criminal trespassing. Once Mexico refuses to take them back, then these individuals are going to be handed over to the Border Patrol or to ICE ERO. So the effect is still going to be the same. There's still going to be a consequence, and that's going to be a criminal conviction on their record. These individuals don't want that. The vast majority of the people that cross our borders illegally are ultimately one day hoping to get a legal pathway, whether that's to citizenship or a lawful permanent resident alien card. That's what they're hoping. And when you have a criminal conviction, that's going to become exponentially more difficult. That's why I do not believe that even the deportation is, the fact that Mexico isn't going to take these people back, I don't think that's going to affect anything as far as the deterrent, because there is going to be a consequence for the criminal trespass.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and the state's top Republican lawmakers are pressing the White House for answers after a man on the terrorist watch list was arrested here in North Carolina.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson signed on to this letter. It is sent to President Biden at the White House here. Also signing on to this letter, House Speaker Tim Moore, Senate President Phil Berger, and the Sheriff of Gates County. That's where this arrest happened. Now, the Lieutenant Governor held the press conference here, standing next to a photo of Awet Hagos from that arrest in Gates County, which is in the eastern part of the state, right along the Virginia border. Hagos faces several charges, including resisting a public officer and assault on a government official. The sheriff's office says Hagos is from Africa and is on the federal terrorist watch list.
The North Carolina Lieutenant Governor and other state officials sent a White House letter about Awet Hagos, who was arrested in the state last week. I'm wondering if...
Say that one more time. Arrest of who?
Awet Hagos in North Carolina last week. I'm wondering if the White House had seen the letter and if you have any information about it.
I don't have anything to share on that particular letter. I'm happy to go back to the team and let you know.
Last week in Gates County, North Carolina, an armed illegal immigrant was arrested who is on the federal terrorist watch list. His name is Awet Hagos. Reports indicate that Hagos came into the United States from Haiti, but is originally from an area near Yemen. a known hotbed of terrorist activity. Police were called to the scene after reports of shots fired, and when deputies moved in to apprehend him, Hagos attempted to disarm a deputy before fleeing. It took law enforcement over 4 hours to finally apprehend him. After learning of this incident, I spoke with Sheriff Ray Campbell of Gates County. I was briefed by him on the situation and thanked him for honorably discharging his duties and for the courageous actions of his deputies. More importantly, I promised I would do everything I could to assist him. At this time, the suspect is currently being held and has been charged with 3 counts of assault on a government official, 3 counts of resisting a public officer, 1 count of carrying a concealed weapon. The Gates County Sheriff's Office currently has 12 deputies, yet they find themselves dealing with a violent illegal immigrant that our own national security has flagged as a potential terrorist threat. Earlier this morning, my office sent a letter to President Biden. I called on President Biden to give immediate answers. In the letter, I raised questions such as, how did Hagos enter the United States? How did Hagos get to North Carolina? Did he travel by air, interstate, or rail? Are there other places that he's been in our state, that he's traveled to or through? And should those areas be on heightened alert? Is he alone? Are there others we should be watching for? Why is Hagos on the terrorist watch list? What organizations does he have ties to? What is his motive and his training? Mr. Hagos reportedly applied for and was denied citizenship. Why? President Biden, when Hagos was denied citizenship, who was alerted of his presence? Did the federal government report this to the state? Did the federal government report any of his activity to local law enforcement? Are there more illegal immigrants on the terrorist watch list here in North Carolina? We deserve answers to these questions. Over the last few years, North Carolina has seen multiple attacks on our infrastructure. We've experienced a cyber attack on the natural gas pipeline, and we've had multiple power substation attacks. Hagos was living just an hour from multiple military installations, both in North Carolina and Virginia. It's imperative that we know immediately if he had known terrorist ties or whether he's been in contact with any associates thereof. We need to know if there are any imminent dangers to the citizens of North Carolina. The silence from the Biden administration on this situation is not an isolated incident. Not even our elected officials in Congress or the Senate have been able to get any answers from him. Last week, members of our federal delegation wrote a letter demanding answers regarding a migrant housing facility in Greensboro. They received no information from the Biden administration, despite this facility going online just in the last few days. There are reports that this migrant facility in Greensboro will house around 800 immigrants from 13 to 17 years old. This facility deserves a high level of scrutiny, and we deserve answers. This is not because we fear some hypothetical tragedy, but because we have experienced it. 2 years ago, right here in Wake County, a deputy was murdered by illegal immigrants. It was reported that one of those 3 suspects was first apprehended by ICE as a minor. He later managed to cross back again into the United States from Mexico. Under Joe Biden's administration, over 7 million individuals have entered our nation illegally. And it's estimated that roughly 500,000 illegal immigrants are here in North Carolina. And we have very little information about these individuals. The federal government has refused to give answers. There have been very little coordination with local elected officials and law enforcement. So I have a message for President Biden. Mr. President, next week you will be here in our state, and we deserve answers. Our police and law enforcement deserve support, transparency, and information. Mr. President, for you to keep our state in the dark about an armed illegal who is on the terrorist watch list from an area near Yemen is not only wrong, it's dangerous. And the people of this great state deserve better.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants in this election to try to keep...
I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. You know, they have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process. And I want people to come in, and we need the people.
Your campaign...
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true. But they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
they're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have...
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts.
Well, I'm not a big fan of yours either. So
I understand.
To be honest.
So let me ask you a question, if I can. You repeatedly said
you aren't the best,
Mr. President. You repeatedly over the course of
just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
It deals with the security of this country. Remember, Homeland Security was created after after September 11th, right?